Hey, why won't either of you talk to me? I cried out to my husband and daughter. It had been a whole month since they started ignoring me. It hurt so much. I didn't know what caused it. When I finally realized they were ignoring me at home, it felt like I was invisible. Hey Dad, did you hear something? Nope, probably just your imagination. My daughter and husband kept dismissing me, even though they could clearly hear me and see me. They acted like I wasn't there at all. I couldn't bear it any longer, so I decided to leave home. 5 years later, I got my revenge in a surprising way. My name is Natalie Smith. I'm 50 years old. I used to be a regular stay-at-home mom with my husband Jackson and our daughter Ruby. Jackson and I met at work 23 years ago, both in it, earning a good living. We were comfortable and didn't have to worry about money. When I turned 30, we welcomed our healthy daughter Ruby into the world, and she grew up without any serious health problems. I became a stay-at-home mom when Ruby was born. I had planned to go back to work after a year, but Jackson disagreed. Natalie, do you really need to go back to work? He asked. I think I should for Ruby's future. My salary is good, and I can support us, I replied. But wouldn't it be better to save money? We've saved up plenty, he countered. I want you to focus on our daughter and the home, he added. After many discussions, I decided to quit my job. That's when my days filled with parenting and household chores began. To be honest, I didn't realize how tough parenting could be until Lena was born. The constant feeding every few hours left me sleep-deprived and often without an appetite, but I had to stay nourished for Ruby's sake. Balancing chores was also tough. I tried to get them done while Ruby slept, but often I'd end up sleeping too due to exhaustion. Jackson helped occasionally, but he usually left things to me. He'd step in when Ruby was calm but handed her back when she cried. And so the days passed by. In a flash, Ruby turned 16. After her sweet 16 party, she confronted me. Mom, I didn't have a photographer at my party, right? She asked. Well, you didn't want to rent a dress, so we bought a new one instead. Remember? That's why we didn't hire a photographer, I explained. What? Why not? All my friends had one. Ruby exclaimed. But you can't get a photographer for free, I pointed out. I don't care about that as a kid. Isn't that something parents should handle? She retorted. Just then, Jackson walked in from work and noticed the tension. What's going on? He asked. Ruby turned to him, complaining, Dad, all my friends had a photographer at their sweet 16 parties, and I was the only one who didn't. Mom's saying it's because I didn't want to rent a dress. Is that fair? Understanding her disappointment, Jackson said, I get it. If all your friends had one, you'd want it too. I'll hire a photographer for a photo shoot in your dress. I'll take care of the cost. Really? Thank you, Dad. I love you. Ruby exclaimed happily, then turned to me with disdain and walked out of the living room. I couldn't hold back from confronting Jackson, who seemed too eager to indulge Ruby. Wait a minute. Why are you making decisions like that without discussing it with me? I asked him. What's the big deal? It's just photos, he replied casually. Just photos. Do you realize how expensive it is to hire a photographer? It could cost over $1,000, I exclaimed. Well, Ruby wants it, and shouldn't you be the one paying for that? Jackson responded, shocking me with his unexpected suggestion. What? I blurted out in disbelief. He added sarcastically, I'm the one supporting the family, you know. You don't contribute to our expenses. That's true, but since Ruby was born, most of her needs have been covered from my savings, I explained. Shut up. You just do as I say. Who do you think you are, not doing the cleaning around here? Then leave. How do you expect to survive now, without a job? Jackson would taunt me with a smirk. As infuriating as it was, there was some truth in his words. Even as Ruby grew older, Jackson kept finding reasons to discourage me from returning to work, so I remained without an income. My savings, which were nearly $100,000 when we married, had dwindled to less than $20,000. If I left now, it would be tough to make it on my own. That realization silenced me. I clenched my teeth as Jackson triumphantly declared, You can't manage without me. Got it? Just do what I say. Don't argue with me again. And make sure you hire a photographer for Ruby's photo shoot, okay? Yes, I replied quietly as he tossed his suit aside and headed for the bathroom. Hanging up his suit, anger simmered inside me. What was all this about? How much more would Ruby and Jackson undermine me? I never intended to be a stay-at-home mom forever. After careful consideration, I resolved to start working from home, just in case. Jackson's dismissive response was, do whatever you want. So I started a job that fit within our tax bracket. The photo shoot for Ruby ended up costing $1,500. She insisted on getting the largest printed picture and having all the photo data, which made it expensive. Looking at the printed picture, Ruby exclaimed, Oh, I look terrible in this. I look way better than that. Don't say that. The photographer worked hard to take this shot for you. Maybe it was the studio's fault in the first place. You chose that place, Mom. It was the only one available when you were free. Stop making excuses. I don't think I'll ever look at this picture again, so just put it away somewhere. What do you mean? I muttered, feeling my voice tremble with anger and sadness. But as a mother, I knew I shouldn't get emotional right then. I took a deep breath to calm myself, holding back tears as I went to the kitchen. Little did I know, worse was yet to come. The next day, I made breakfast as usual, but Jackson and Ruby never came downstairs. Just as I was about to check on them, I heard them chatting as they came down the stairs. Hey Dad, where are we going for breakfast? How about that cafe near the station? I heard they have great breakfasts. I want to go there. All right, let's go then, Jackson replied as they both put on their shoes and headed for the front door. Confused and frustrated, I blurted out, wait a second. Breakfast is ready. Ruby, can't you hear me? Let's eat. But they didn't respond. The door closed with a slam, and their cheerful voices faded away. I couldn't understand what was going on. It wasn't just this once. They ignored me every time I called out to them. Why would they both do this to me? Did they really not hear me, or was something else going on? Later that evening, they returned home together, having had dinner out without me and ignoring the meal I had prepared. Each went straight to their rooms. This pattern repeated day after day, and it broke my heart. A month passed with no change in their behavior. Then one day I found completed divorce papers in the living room. What does this mean? I asked Jackson, but as usual, he and Ruby ignored me, happily eating pizza and watching a movie together. That's when it hit me. All the emotions I'd been holding back boiled over. In a desperate panic, tears streaming down my face, I finally spoke up. Hey, why won't either of you answer me? I pleaded, but there was no response. They just kept laughing and watching the movie, completely ignoring me. I didn't understand what had triggered this. By the time I realized it, my husband and daughter were ignoring me in our own home. You're supposed to be my family, but here it's like I'm invisible, I cried out. Hey Dad, did you hear something? Nah, probably your imagination. They dismissed me, even though they could clearly hear me and see me. They acted as if I didn't exist. I couldn't bear it any longer. Clutching the divorce papers, I packed only the essentials into my carry-on and left the house without saying a word. I took a train to my parents' home, about an hour away. Thankfully, my parents are still alive and enjoying their retirement. They were surprised to see me arrive with luggage, but they welcomed me with open arms once I explained everything. I can see you've been through a lot, Natalie. We're sorry we didn't notice sooner. You can stay here as long as you need to get back on your feet, my parents said kindly. Their words brought tears to my eyes that day. It was the first time in decades that I had cried so openly. The following day, I filed for divorce and reverted to my maiden name, changing from Smith to Adams. Despite feeling some loneliness, I managed to steady my emotions and started looking for a job. It was daunting. After leaving work at 30 and having a 20-year gap in my employment history, I wondered if there was still a place for me in the workforce at 50. Well, that's quite a twist. Here's a rewrite. I was grateful to be hired on the spot by the first company I applied to. They valued my previous experience with a well-known company, and soon I was handling important responsibilities. Over the next 5 years, I mastered my job and began training new hires. I formed a special bond with Harris, a colleague around my daughter Ruby's age. It felt like having a son, and I enjoyed chatting with him. His mother, around my age, became a good friend, and we talked about everything from work to personal matters. Harris, now in his 3rd year of the company, handed me an envelope one day. What's this? I asked curiously. He grinned shyly and said, I'm getting married, and I really want you to come to my wedding. Congratulations, I'd love to be there. Thank you, I replied warmly. When I got home and opened the invitation, I was stunned. The bride was none other than my daughter, Ruby Smith. You're kidding, right? Is this some kind of coincidence? I exclaimed aloud. Just then, my phone rang. It was Jackson. Hello? It's been a while. How are you holding up? He asked casually. What do you want? Don't be like that, I replied tersely. Ruby's getting married. You should come to the wedding, Jackson said abruptly. What are you talking about? We're divorced. I can't just show up and pretend everything's fine, I retorted. Just come, okay? I'll send the invitation to your parents' house, he said, ending the call before I could respond. I had no intention of attending Ruby's wedding as her mother. However, I had already promised Harris that I would be there. It would be rude to decline now. With that in mind, I reluctantly decided to go. On the day of the wedding, 2 months later, I attended as a guest on the groom's side, since Harris worked for me. The ceremony itself was intimate, with only close family present. Guests were to join for the reception. I noticed an empty seat in the family section. Apparently, Jackson hadn't seen me yet. As the introductory movie for the bride and groom concluded, they began greeting each table. Harris approached our table with a warm greeting. Thank you so much for coming today, he said happily. Beside him, Ruby's expression turned pale with shock. Jackson, noticing this, rushed over in disbelief. "What's going on? Why are you sitting here?" he demanded, breathless. All eyes in the room turned toward us. Harris, observing the tense moment, asked with curiosity, "Excuse me, do you know Ms. Adams?" Jackson replied hastily, "She's Ruby's mother." "What? But I was told Ruby's mother abandoned the family and left," Harris exclaimed in confusion. "That's not true," I interjected firmly. It became clear that Jackson and Ruby had fabricated a story painting me as the villain. They stood there, guilt written on their faces. I decided to set the record straight. "Harris, I apologize for not telling you the truth earlier. I am Ruby's mother, Natalie Adams." "Did you really abandon Ruby and your husband?" Harris asked, searching for clarity. "That's not the case. At home, I was treated like nothing more than a housekeeper by my husband and daughter, and eventually, they started ignoring me." "Ignored?" "Yes, it went on for a month, and I couldn't take it anymore." Jackson had already prepared divorce papers, so I took them and left. "It wasn't me who left. They pushed me away." "Ruby, why did you ignore your mom?" I asked, hoping for an explanation. Ruby's smile faded as she retorted defiantly. "Because everything about her was annoying, so Dad and I decided to ignore her. She left after just 1 month. Isn't that funny?" she replied callously. "Ruby, are you serious? It's fine. It won't bother you. Just think of me as not having a mother," Ruby said with a smile, trying to brush off the situation. But Harris, visibly angry, couldn't stay silent. "What are you saying? This is serious. I never knew you could be so heartless," Harris said, his voice filled with disappointment. Ruby, surprised by his reaction, responded in confusion. "Huh?" She clearly hadn't expected Harris to side with me. Harris, his tone cold and resolute, pulled away from Ruby's touch. "This engagement is over. I'm glad I saw your true colors before we got married," Harris declared firmly. "What? Wait, you can't be serious," Ruby protested, shocked. "Don't touch me. I don't want to be with someone as cruel as you ever again. The wedding is canceled," Harris stated firmly, cutting off any further discussion. "No way." Harris took the microphone and addressed the guests, apologizing sincerely. "I'm very sorry," he said, instructing them to take their gifts back and leave. "Wait, everyone, please don't leave." Ruby cried out tearfully, but the guests departed with cold stares. Just as I was about to follow them out, Jackson confronted me. "Natalie, do something," he pleaded urgently. "Huh? Why should I? This is your doing, isn't it? You ruined Ruby's wedding, and you don't regret it," I retorted, unable to suppress a laugh. "What's so funny?" Jackson yelled, growing more frustrated. "Just the irony of it all. I don't feel an ounce of sympathy for Ruby. You both brought this upon yourselves. You deserve this," I replied firmly. "What about Ruby's marriage?" he pressed, his voice fraught with concern. "I don't care. I'm just glad Harris, my valuable team member, doesn't have to marry someone like Ruby. He deserves someone much better. So goodbye. I won't see you ever again." With those words, I walked away from the venue without looking back. A sense of relief washed over me, knowing I had made the right decision. Later on, Harris and Ruby's engagement was called off. It turned out Ruby had been working as a temporary employee and had planned to quit her job for marriage. Without a stable income and now without a fiancé, Ruby started spending recklessly on designer items to cope with her stress. Meanwhile, Jackson found himself draining his savings to support Ruby's lifestyle. It was clear their unsustainable lifestyle was heading towards disaster. Finally free from those burdens, I felt liberated. Moving forward, I want to focus on living my life to the fullest, pursuing my own happiness without being weighed down by their drama.